Skylark, have you anything to say to me? Can you tell me
Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with jazz singer Aimée Allen. She spoke with us about going to crowdfunding with her new 2018 CD called Wings Uncaged, and it's getting great reviews. She was born and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and her connection with music began as a child that was full of listening to classic jazz in the home because her mother spun them all on their family turntable. She has learned well over time and began singing professionally with jazz and a cappella groups in college and would go on to Paris and beyond to learn the craft. So please get to know her and dig this interview, my friends.
Aimée, thank you for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz. I appreciate it.
Hey, my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and jump right in to your latest CD, Wings Uncaged. Talk to me about this project. Talk to me about kind of the creative forces that went into this and how you feel now that it's out in people's hands.
Wow. I'm feeling really good. It's sort of an interesting time, and I'm really happy to reach people with this music, standards and originals. This project actually started over 2 years ago. I'm always writing. I'm always working with musicians on new material because it's just something that's always sort of floating in my head. I had been writing some of these tunes. There's even one of them that I wrote with one of the musicians and sort of slowly putting them into the repertoire and doing them at sessions. And I knew I wanted to do a new project. I noticed that these sort of winged creatures were popping up in my music. I think the writing process is a little bit mysterious, and sometimes it comes from someplace else. So I really did sort of notice something happening. And when you do a project, you do try to think of themes as you look at what you're working on. As I noticed this, I saw that the winged creatures were sort of working according to their nature to find a way out or a way around the limitation, or to migrate, or to escape, or to rise above. Artistic life as an independent artist being what it is, I began to put together a crowdfunding campaign because it's hard to put a project together. Oddly enough, when I put the crowdfunding campaign together, I called this project The Wings and the Gilded Cage. And I put sort of a homemade little video together with my musicians and some friends. I knew that the project wasn't completely congealed because that's just the nature of the creative process. I know for me, the more that I perform music, the more I sort of find myself in it and understand it, that there's something that happens with audiences and with just the magic of the moment of performing that, takes you to different places. So I'll say over time, I think the concept and my understanding of this project began to sort of coalesce. Also, we're living through pretty interesting times. They're certainly not boring. I will say that there is one song on here that sort of deals with that rather directly, that talks about democracy and talks about the discourse around us, sort of asks the listener, what are we going to do with this particular limitation, adversity that we find around us. I felt like that really sort of fit in with the theme. I'll just say one more thing about the musicians. I get a lot of inspiration and information from the musicians I perform with always. It informs how I sing. It informs how I think about the music. I love the exchange. So I've been performing with Francois Moutin. He's on my last album, actually, for a few years. And I've been performing with Billy Test for a few years, and I put those two together, and it was really magical. To do this project, I knew I wanted a drummer as well. It took a moment, but finally I got the chance to do a gig with Kush Abadi. And when I played with that group, I was really just immediately blown away by the chemistry between all of us. And I sort of said to myself, oh, these are the guys I want to record with. That all came together in the span of, I'd say, the last 2 years. And incredibly, I was able to get some funds from my crowdfunding campaign from fans and friends. And I'd never done that before. That's a really interesting process for an artist. Incredibly, it came together. And I'm so I'm sort of delighted that people are enjoying it and listening to it, and people like you, Joe, are supporting it by playing it and introducing the music to people.
Everybody tends to have a level of fear every time there's a new technology that comes up. We've always seen this. Like when even from 8-track to tape to CD to digital, there's always this, if we go into a new medium, we're going to squeeze all of these potential sales out. And most of the time we find out when we chart all these trends that it's inaccurate. And the thing that I think is good about technology is that if you embrace it and you embrace the new, you tend to come out on top karmically somehow. And the beauty of the crowdfunding idea is that you're getting people to buy in before they actually buy the project. That has to feel good that you already have buy-in. They already support and like what you do enough to give you money to do it. Did you feel that way?
Yes, absolutely. I'd never done that before. I mean, it's actually a really sort of psychologically deep process because as an artist, you have to go in front of the people and you have to ask them, for money, which is, it's humbling, and it forces you also to define yourself and your art and your music and your project in a specific way. And it's difficult because, as I keep saying, this is a process, and I feel like even when I did the crowdfunding campaign, I wasn't quite sure how the end product would look. And I think that's always true, especially in the jazz genre when you're really paying homage to the improvisational nature and the exchange and the performance. It was very humbling, and at the same time, as I had to do this difficult thing and humble myself and go out there, I was basically met with such support and love and motivation, really, and inspiration from people. And yes, you get this built-in audience, and then they sort of come with you on the journey. That, sort of what you get back in return, is really hard to do. It's really hard to dig deep and make the ask. But then what you get back on the other side is beyond anything you could have ever imagined. So, and it wasn't even like, there were highs and lows. Trust me, it wasn't all roses. It was really difficult. I didn't raise as much money as I wanted to, but I raised a nice chunk, and the support that the people brought me, and even now that it's out, it's like the people who contributed, they are sort of co-producers with me. They are sort of part of it. So they get to sort of buy into the pride of this artistic work coming out here that they basically helped make, It's amazing.
So you grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
I did, yeah. I grew up actually just outside the city, a community called Bethel Park. We call it the South Hills in that area. But that is my community, the Pittsburgh area.
So what albums, jazz-wise, were you listening to growing up, and how did you get into music?
The source of all of my musical education is my mother, actually. She's a singer and a huge jazz buff, so I grew up hearing jazz in my home pretty much constantly, from her record collection, from her singing, from her telling us all about her experiences. And also we listen to the radio, by the way. We listen to jazz radio. We listen to AM and FM radio and pop and soul and Motown and, a little bit of gospel, but a lot of classic jazz, and also a lot of I have an older brother. He's a guitarist, so he sort of brought another angle of the guitarist and the guitar jazz and even some fusion in the 80s. I mean, I grew up listening to Ella Fitzgerald and Dinah Washington and Abby Lincoln and Carmen McRae. I mean, those are some of my sort of favorite, the icons. Sarah Vaughan is sort of my all-time favorite, to be honest with you. Joe Williams. Then we listened, what was sort of contemporary. I listened to a lot of Al Jarreau. He's one of the people who that's just a soundtrack of my youth. And then, of course, Stevie Wonder and Michael Jackson and the Four Tops and Diana Ross and all of that also. It's a little bit of an eclectic mix, but the jazz was really at the center.
So let's go ahead and move on. Getting out of college and going to Paris and getting involved with bossa had to be a big, huge learning curve for you.
Well, it was really interesting. I grew up in the Pittsburgh area in Pennsylvania, and we're talking about the late 80s, the early 90s, and then I went to college, I went to study abroad, and I went to Paris. I was a kid who grew up listening to jazz music in the United States, and I loved it. Jazz music wasn't really popular among my peers. It's not really what the other kids were listening to. So when I went to Paris, it was pretty cool to find myself in a place where jazz was incredibly popular among sort of the mainstream. And that was really cool. And that is true. That is true of France and of Paris particularly. I started singing because I went to a couple of jam sessions and I met some people, and I ended up getting a gig that I did in a restaurant. And I was, I was young and pretty green in terms of professionally gigging, really green in terms of professionally gigging. So yeah, it was an education, but I will say, I think at the time I was a singer who knew the standards. I could go and sing stuff from the fake book, real book, and that is the first gig that I got there. And I have to say, I don't know if that would have happened for me. Maybe it would have. I don't know if it would have happened for me here at the time. I don't know if I would have had the confidence. And I don't know if I would have been I think part of the reason I got that particular gig, which was a totally awesome gig, was that I could just show up and sing those songs because I knew them, because I had been hearing them my whole life. So that was an opportunity. I learned some things. Just about, being gigging and being a professional. And I also learned that I loved it and I wanted to keep doing it. And then I met some musicians, and we put a bossa nova group together. Bossa is very popular in France also, just like jazz. It has a pretty special place in their musical culture. So that was fun.
Absolutely. So the other thing that's been a part of who you are is travel. You've been to Italy, Russia, France, Senegal. What do you learn about yourself, not only as a musician, but as a person when you go to these different cultures?
Oh, wow. You learn a lot. Travel, even apart from music, travel is a great way to learn. You learn a lot about your own culture when you travel, because people relate to you in a certain way as an American. Sometimes they don't know you're an American, which is kind of fun, too. That happens to me. The cultural exchange when you're making music, when you're going someplace, when you're singing jazz, is very, very rich and very powerful. And it's kind of beautiful to go to a place like Russia or Dakar in Senegal or Italy and sing American jazz standards and have people just in love with this music and so grateful, and they want to talk to you about New York or about Sarah Vaughan or about Miles Davis, and you sort of see that this cultural export, which is jazz, has just been, it's moving and it's amazing. It's a powerful thing, and it's touched people all over the world, and people still love it. They still want to go out and hear standards. You go to Mount Moscow, people want to hear all the standards, They want to hear you sing them. They want to tell you about their record collection. They want to tell you when they first heard Ella Fitzgerald, and then there are great musicians in all of these places too, which is incredible.
So up to this point in your life, you have this new album. You're clearly busy on a regular basis. Are you happy with where you're at?
I am content with the moment. I try to be content with the moment. I want to make more music. I want to sing more. I want to travel more. I want to write more. To be honest with you, the reception of this project has been kind of different and better than any of my other projects. So I'm sort of looking forward to what it can bring and the opportunities that it can bring for me to just share more music. I'm always working on my craft. It's a constant progression. I was rehearsing last night with some musicians I'm doing a gig with, and trying to add things to my repertoire and learn new things, and also bounce off other musicians and get better. Feel more comfortable and feel more, take more risks. I love taking risks. That's kind of what jazz is about. Just propelling yourself forward, becoming new every day, every time you sing, and I just want to keep progressing. I want to keep writing. I want to get better. I want to sing with fabulous musicians. That's like my favorite thing in the world. Keep making music, basically.
So the one part of your educational process is seeing live shows. Talk to me about what live jazz shows, something that really jumped out to you that really made a huge impact on you.
Wow. I'll say I was fortunate when I was a kid because my mom, who I just spoke about, we went out and listened to jazz as a family, or like sometimes just her and I, or even me and my brother. I think I definitely encourage everyone listening, go out and support live music and support live jazz. I think it's a sacred, spiritual, special experience because live jazz is improvised music, improvised, partially improvised. There's a canon of incredible, rich harmonic, rich rhythmic compositions out there that people are playing, and it's never played the same way twice. When you go and hear live music, what you're seeing and experiencing has never happened before and will never happen again. I think people who have been to a really good show know that when you're in the room and magical things happen on stage and the musicians and the performers are sharing that with the audience, there actually is an exchange between the audience and the performer. They contribute an energy. Their reception really affects how everyone is going to be playing and performing. And there's just an amazing alchemy that takes place. And if you've been to a great show, you walk out of there and you're like, that was magic. I'll never forget that. That'll never happen again. And then you tell your friends about it. You're like, I went to see this person, and here's what happened. It was incredible. And it expands your horizons. And also you have a moment where you think about our connections as people, what we share, about the joy of creation. We need moments like that where we just think about how we're connected and what we share that makes us happy and joyful.
So why do you love jazz?
Oh, man, I love it for so many reasons. I love it because it's such an incredible art form. I love that it allows musical artists to express themselves and their personalities in a really unique way, because everyone sounds different, everyone plays different, everyone sings different, and that is encouraged. This art form encourages that. It's not about being cookie cutter. It's not about sounding like somebody else. It's really about finding your own voice. And you do that in a structure where you have to communicate with the other musicians. You have to create something together. You have to work together. I think that is really useful, and I think it's a little less, and it's a beautiful thing when you do it. That's why everybody feels so good. That's why everyone looks into each other's eyes and smiles, because they're like, hey, check out what we're making together. Check out how we're exchanging. And I'm getting to know you and your voice a little better. You're getting to know me and my voice a little better. We're creating something beautiful. I mean, that's sort of high philosophical, but that's what I love. That's what I love about this art form.
Cool. Everyone has a perception or a version of who they think you are. Your family, your friends, your fans, but you know who you are. So tell me, who do you think you are?
Wow. Wow, Joe, you've got the question. This is no joke. Who do I think I am? Man, that is a very good question. I think that's a very interesting question because you are right. People have different perceptions. Sometimes we struggle to reconcile those perceptions. Sometimes we're like, oh, these people think this of me. I want them to understand better who I am. So I'm going to try to educate them in who I am. I'm many things, I contain multitudes, Walt Whitman said. I'm many things. I do many things more and more, I think, as I sort of settle into myself. With age, I think you become more yourself. I'm an artist. I love that sort of identification more and more because I think it's a noble calling. I like to create things that touch people, that make people feel something. I'm a songwriter. I am a daughter and a sister and an aunt and a friend. And I'm a citizen. Yeah, I'm all of those things. Is that an answer, Joe?
Yes, it is. Totally. Yeah, there's a lot of ways that you can go with that, and that's definitely a very good way to go with it. So with that,
Thank you.
I saved the deepest one for last. Just thank you for taking time out to talk about your album, your life, and music. I appreciate it.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for your show.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest singers and players in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, New York City, Kansas City, Missouri, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Amy for her time, her music, and her cool. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Won't you lead me there? Lead me there. Won't you lead me there?
Neon Jazz.